that we're doing this in a green season. And what I mean by that is we don't have a president in place that we had 8 years ago or 12 years ago now that was actively seeking to destroy faith. We've got a president right now that's trying to build faith and do everything he can to clear the runway for the faith-based leaders. And Mark, I'm going to say this tonight because I've said it a million times on this show over the last several months. I'm going to say it again because I don't think people understand this. President Trump, folks, not your spiritual leader. He's not your pastor. And people do not need to be looking to the president for their spiritual advice and their spiritual guidance because that's not his role. His role is the president of the United States. He has to be president over all people. He is not the spiritual leader of America, even though he's doing a lot of things that's leading us spiritually without us even knowing it probably. But the spiritual responsibility, Mark, falls on the body of Christ. We are the voice. We are the light. We are the truth. We are the word. We are the influence. We are the salt of the earth. We're the light of the world. And you know, we've talked about this. Look, these people around him and those names that you mentioned, a lot of those names are right there in that White House every day, talking into his ear, giving him all sorts of advice. Yep. And he is a young Christian. And he is a young believer, and he's not going to know a lot of things that they're telling him, whether they're true or not. And you know, and again, I don't say that disparagingly about the president, but these people should know better, and they should have more of a sense of that, and to be very careful what they're telling him, because Mark, they're going to be held in account, because what they're doing, they're making decisions for not just President Trump. They're making decisions. They're putting stuff in his mind that's going to affect all the nation. That's over 340 million people in this country. And then you start throwing this corruption in, and no wonder the trust factor is zilch when people talk about the ministry and people talk about faith. And look, I just think that we're going to be held in account to this. I think that this is going to be a generation that's going to have to answer for why we're given so much during this time, so much, and we still being given so much. We did very little with this opportunity because there's a harvest out there, Mark, that still needs to be reaped. There's a harvest out there of people that still need the gospel. There's a harvest of people out there that are hurting and dying tonight. And you know, I know there's a lot of people without churches tonight. And look, I'm not going to blame these people that are without churches. They're not the problem. The problem's the system. The system has destroyed a lot of people's faith, and it's destroyed a lot of people in general. And it's time for the system to come down. But you cannot force people out of it. They're going to have to willfully walk away. And that's the other problem, is that people, no matter what you tell them on this show tonight, they're still going to stay in that system because they're comfortable with it. They're comfortable.
Well, let's go back to your original question where you're talking about Trump can't do it all, right? Like your original statement, right? You were talking about with the church, right? Get off their behinds, get on the front line. Ask yourselves this for a second. Why would the president allow Dr. Birx to come on and say that to these evangelical leaders?
It's a good question.
Why would he do that?
Excellent question.
Now, my humble opinion is to show them where this is going and to get off your butts and do something about it. Get outside of the four walls and go do something about it. You know what I mean? Again, you can't, people think, oh, well, it's like the atmosphere that's been created in the church system right now because of the wealth, the influence, the prosperity matches, the hyper grace, all we go right down the list, right? It has created a spirit of passivity, right? It's created a bunch of stuff, and it has literally just sucked or drained the warrior spirit out of the people. Far cry from the days of the Black Coat Regiment, when they were willing to lay down their life for their country. You know what I mean? A pastor was the one that fired the first shot. And so, so I started looking at this, and I was asking the Lord, what is this? What is the deal with this? And he started dealing with me about a spiritual conscientious objective, where they were pacifist. They didn't want to fight. And that's almost where we're at right now with these churches. They've all become a spiritual conscientious objector. And it's like, wow, man. When you really sit back and think of that, because they're comfortable. They don't want to do anything. They just want to sit back and enjoy the riches or the carnality of whatever it is that's keeping these people in here right now. And so that's just my humble opinion.
No,
of why I feel like Dr. Birx was allowed to come in there was for a reality check to show these evangelical leaders, including his spiritual advisory board, hey guys, guess what? Get off your butts, because this is not coming, Chris. This is here.
It's here, Mark.
It's here now. She had it literally in written guidelines on a piece of paper. She had it written. She held it up in front of the camera. I don't have a copy of it.
I'll tell you something else.
The
But let me tell you what goes along with that, and it's not so much a spiritual issue, but it's the country in general. Had Director Mike on early this afternoon, and he was talking to somebody about all of these signs. When you walk into the store, you walk into any store right now, every single one of them has stuff on their floors about the 6 feet. Okay?
That's right.
He was told by a pretty good source today, those materials were ordered in March. They had those materials ready to go out like a day. And I remember this day. It was my grandson's birthday, March 15th, because I was down in Florida. And this is when the world went crazy. A week after that, the whole world started going to quarantine. It was crazy. But he said that material for those signs on the floor that we see today, they were already in place. They already had them ready to go. So that beggars a question. They knew this was coming. This was manufactured, the response to it. And again, like you're saying, it's about it being in stone. Mark, there's a lot of other things that are in stone that we probably ain't even heard about yet. And
right.
You start looking at the conditions in your state and my state tonight and all sorts of states in this union. And I hear a lot of belly aching. I hear a lot of griping of people. And look, folks, we're all frustrated with it. We should be. But you know something? We should have been frustrated about it before. We shouldn't have waited till July to be frustrated about this. We were screaming here on this program, this was crazy back in March. And instead of us going forward, Mark, all we've done is gone backward. I think we're more restrictive tonight than we were when this thing was at peak. But the problem is they were already planning this. And this second wave, the only nation that's got a second wave right now is America. There's no other nation. They can't even call it a pandemic because the deaths are low. But these are the forces that are not just seeking to destroy the nation, Mark. They're seeking to destroy the church, because it seems like every directive lately here by these governors and how they're doing these things. And I'm not saying that every church is great, but I'm talking about when you start dissecting what these people are trying to do, it's an attack on faith. It's not just the system they're after, but they're after faith.
Right.
They want to destroy true faith. This has been in the works for a long time.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question here. Everything that's going on right now, like with Newsom out there in California, that's a flat out assault on faith right there.
Without
he's trying to stop home groups as well. But let's take a look at the church system for a second here. The attacks that have been going on. We've had 6 churches burn?
6 churches burn. At
6
least
churches burn. We've had all these attacks nationwide. We got Dr. Birx slamming the guidelines down their throat. Now let me ask a question here for a second. If the system is under judgment, is this what the judgment is on the church system?
Could be.
Is it God saying, my hand of protection is coming off you guys until you come out of this? Until then, this is the way it's going to be. So this is just something to think about.
Yeah, Mark, I think you're hitting square on. And I'm going to tell you something we can't escape. And we talked about this too, because there was some ministry, I don't want to name it tonight because there's a lot of clouds over that ministry tonight, but they were out there saying that this is God's judgment on America and all this. And I think we're both in agreement. I don't believe it's God's judgment. I think that this is something that the enemy is doing. It's an attack of the devil. God is allowing it. He could stop it, but he so desired. But I'll tell you this much. I think God is allowing this to shake the church free of something. And I have to tell you, when you start getting down to it, a lot of these churches that were closed down during this was probably doing the country a favor that they were shut down. I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. It wasn't a bad thing that some of these churches are gone. And then you start tying all this corruption in, man, with this PPP money and these multi-million billionaire ministries still wanting more money. I'm going to tell you something. The symbolism of the churches burning, it ain't the only thing's about to burn, Mark.
No.
And that's why we said the fuse is lit and the pin has been pulled. There's about to be a war for America. But I'm going to tell you something. The war's not going to be pretty, because there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of casualties that we're going to look around, and there are going to be a lot of people that are taken out in this that need to be taken out.
See, here's the problem I have with the church going with these millions of dollars, right? It's because when Joseph went before Pharaoh, he said, you got 7 years of plenty and 7 years
of famine.
Of lean coming, right? Famine. But the 7 years of plenty was to stock up for the 7 years of famine. The churches should have been stocking up, Chris, for the years of famine or these months of famine. The money should be going out to the individuals, not coming into the churches right now to be taking care of the people.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. I'm going to say something again, very controversial. I don't care. All these millions of dollars. This is what I'm kind of wondering at this point, because this whole thing, a lot of this stuff's been a setup from the beginning. This whole plan thing, we're taking the country down. Things have been allowed to happen because it was a setup.
Yeah.
How much of this money was allowed to be released to these churches to find out where it was going and what it was being used for?
It's a good point.
So here's what I would officially call for. I think it's time to call for an audit
of
these churches
that got that
to
money.
Figure out where this money's going, what they're doing with it. Audit these churches right now, because this is ridiculous. People have a right to know where their money's going.
Yeah.
Period.